Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Promised Neverland manga review. This is going to be for the chapters that make up volume 13 of the manga, chapters 107 to 115, and that means that within the next 2 or 3 videos we will be caught up with the manga where it is, which is obviously the goal, to get to the weekly ones so the videos can be covering the weekly chapters as they come out, which should be really fun. So yeah, we're covering up to 115 here, then we'll get into like the mid 120s coming up after that, then the early 130s, and I think we're just a couple of chapters on past that at present. So yeah, not too many videos and we will be caught up, so that's great. But yeah, let's get into this. Volume 13, we cover a lot of interesting stuff, some very emotional stuff I think throughout. I think most of these with what they deal with, some pretty, heavy things happening here, because obviously the last volume ended with Yugo and Lucas knowing that they're going back in here to face Andrew and his squad, and that realistically they're going to die protecting the kids. And that's basically what 107 is about. They go in, they both say that, even if it costs us our lives, we won't let them reach the kids. We see them gradually, take out, Yugo takes out one of the other guys, and like by the end of it, I think there's like only Andrew and like 3 others left by the end. There's a couple of interesting flashbacks here showing how good of a team Yugo and Lucas are, and how like they used to constantly fight with each other, but one of their I suppose other siblings, Dinah, kind of brought them together, and they ended up actually being amazing teammates. And they're just kind of talking about how, in a way, the kids have inspired both of them, especially Yugo, that like, he lost everything, by chance I regained it, I'm not letting you take it away from me again, and that he's gonna stop Andrew right here and now. So it's a lot of these early chapters here, as we deal with this initial kind of fight here, it is about, showing how far Yugo as a character has come from the character we met when we first entered the shelter all the way up to now, where he cares so much about the plan, the kids, their goal, and stuff like that. So it's I think really well done. As we go into 108, we continue, the things get even more intense. They're doing really well, taking out loads of guards, but I think the first grenade is thrown in at this point. Lucas covers Yugo and kind of takes some of the blast for him, and that kind of injures his leg. But in the aftermath of this, they do manage to get out. They take out one of the other guys as well. And, they're just saying that both Yugo and Lucas are unwilling to sort of leave each other behind if they get wounded or not. And it's pretty intense because like there's gunfire everywhere, and like the characters get hit a couple of times, but they're wearing bulletproof gear, so it's not super serious. But eventually, by the time they get into the kind of armory, Lucas is kind of a little bit riddled with bullets, at least his kind of flak jacket is, as kind of Andrew kind of is the only one left, and he comes in, and obviously Lucas and Yugo are about injured at this point, and he thinks he has them dead completely. You're going to die here too, is what he says. And that's when it's revealed that Lucas isn't actually unconscious. He shoots the gun, and they've obviously let some combustible gas out at this point. An explosion happens, and the idea is, have all 3 of these characters died here? Yugo, Lucas, and also Andrew. As we kind of cut to chapter 108, 109, which I think is a really good chapter. We see the kids, where they've escaped to is actually into the kind of forest, kind of cavern areas that they have some memories from very early on in the kind of mission. They kind of get into the idea that Chris is actually still pretty badly injured. He's kind of had an infection, I suppose, is sort of growing from what happened. Things are going wrong. Emma begins to panic here, because I suppose this is where it fully kind of hits her, the fact that 2 of the kids have died already. Now Yugo and Lucas are probably going in to die as well. She sort of understands that, and she's kind of losing her confidence and kind of composure for one of the first times really in the series. And then suddenly, like, Yugo just appears before her and like talks to her, and it's really interesting because it seems like, oh, he has just turned back up, but something's clearly off because Lucas isn't there, and he's not acting as if he's just come back from this firefight to the death, and he's not injured in any way as well. So something's up here, but it is a good conversation that they have. Like, she just reassesses the situation. He says, "No, it's not your fault about this. Do you remember what I said to you before? Is your decision correct?" It's important to make the correct decision, or at least try to, but that's not everything. None of us know if our decision is right or wrong in the moment. That's why what's important is after the decision, the effort to make the decision you made correct. Even if the decision you made brings unfavorable results, what can you do from there? The struggle is what's important. If decisions are everything, life is just one big gamble. Believe in what you've decided, Emma, and no matter what results from it, keep going. You and everyone will be able to change the world. And that's when it's revealed that it's a dream. He again confirms to her, you're going to change the world, but it's a dream. She just wakes up and she's still in this sort of chaotic situation, but I suppose just the memories of basically what Yugo would say to her, gets her sort of back on track. But this is where we get a flashback to January 2046, and Yugo in the shelter alone and talking about how he's scared, it's painful, he doesn't want to think about anything, he questions why he's still alive. You see him sort of panicking about like remembering all of his own siblings. No one's here, they all died, it was my fault. He talks about how he has to live, but it all gets too much for him, and he says, I'm sorry, please forgive this, I beg you, please let me, I'll go to your side. And he's about to shoot himself, he's about to commit suicide here, and this is when Emma and the rest of them arrive at the shelter. And he stops, obviously, to deal with this. And he says, like, I suppose he's reflecting on this in the present day. That day, I lost my chance to die. But because I didn't die that time, I was able to meet you and see Lucas again. I avenged my family, destroyed that hunting ground, I found hope. This past year and a half was so much fun. I'm glad I lived. And he says, but damn it, I don't want to die. I wanted to see the human world and watch them grow up. This is pathetic. I have so many regrets, but if I can protect them, I can die smiling. Fulfill your dream, good luck, Emma, as we sort of, again, recap over the explosion that's just happened. They see that sort of happen and kind of in a way realize that must be what happened. Something's gone wrong over there. And they all begin to have their doubts. But then we get, I suppose, what is effectively, I suppose, the other side, basically. Is it time for Yugo and Lucas to move on? Lucas kind of wakes him up, says, look, Yugo, we see Lucas actually has both of his hands here, which I suppose potentially is the 100% confirmation that they did both die for sure, 100%. Everyone, we see Dinah's there as well. Sorry I came here earlier than I thought. It's okay. You did your best, Yugo. So it's an interesting one because obviously what they do in like, is it the next chapter they reveal that Andrew actually survived. I think this is probably one of the most interesting discussion things from this chapter of just, I thought that they did the death of Yugo and Lucas very well there with regards to, they're your older characters. Of course we're focusing on the younger characters of Emma and just that whole group. In a way, I think it fits the story that going forward, it is the younger characters having to make the decisions for themselves and taking the adult opinions basically out of the picture allows the series to kind of maintain a certain level of kind of tension going forward, in that you suddenly have lost that stability of having Lucas and Yugo there to help things so much, because they were kind of the glue in a way that kept things together, like during the end of like the Goldie Pond fight with Luvis and so on, and here they're able to save them from Andrew and his squad. Now they don't have that, and it means that like the older kids, Emma has to step up even more now because they don't have that adult kind of character left. But I do question, just from a sort of logic point of view, how they both basically in the end kill themselves. It is this kind of suicide kind of moment for the two of them to take out Andrew, to kill the last kind of soldier that's coming after them. But Andrew ends up surviving, And then it seems to be like the manga doubling down on the fact that for sure Jugo and Lucas are dead, unless they come back to it again. I suppose the idea is like, did we really see the bodies? Not necessarily. And especially with, I suppose, ultimately how in the end Andrew is like injured. It's bad, but like if he survived, why can't Hugo and Lucas survive? I would understand it if perhaps Lucas died during this, just because he was already pretty badly injured. But like Jugo, prior to going in, like I don't think he was that badly injured. And if Lucas was protecting him, I could definitely see a case being made for like Hugo appearing at some point later on. But again, I felt like that the end of that last chapter of the passing on to the other side moment, them being reunited with the rest of their siblings, was such a strong moment. But then the Andrew thing immediately makes you kind of question it. It is an interesting one because they've already teased us once with a character death, that being Norman. We know Norman's alive, and then they reveal to us, you didn't see his body. We just led you to believe that that's what was happening because we marched Norman off like he was emotionally going to sacrifice himself for the plan. We never showed you him being eaten by a demon or anything like that. We didn't do the Sister Krona thing with Norman. You just assumed that was what happened. Here it's like 3 characters, point blank explosion. One of them survives, but the 2 characters who are like make the heroic sacrifice are the ones who don't. It kind of diminishes their sacrifice that they didn't kill this guy, and then it put the kids in this situation a bit. So anyway, that's what happens here. So the kids kind of begin to panic a little bit because of everything that happened. Jillian here especially wants to immediately go and find them. Ray kind of snaps back that they would have died for nothing if we go out there and the enemy is still looking for us. But they all eventually calm down. They acknowledge everyone is anxious. Emma kind of puts on the happy face. We have to eat first, protect ourselves, and then we'll see what kind of comes after this. I think it's Oliver comes over to Emma at this point and reveals that actually Lucas left a note that I think you should know about at this point. It's what Lucas heard on the call that came to the room. It was right before we were attacked. It's from the supporter, and here's what it was said. It says, first, this is Lucas, I suppose, speaking here. First, I heard static, then a 20-second recording. My name is William Minerva. I will raise the revolt. I shall give you the world you deserve. I will end the Neverland. I give you this new promise. First, leave the farms and go to this place. I'll be waiting for you all. 735-941, 10-10-7, 13-11-2, 21-8. The rest is a row of numbers written on the note, and there are William Minerva wasn't alive. It's a kind of recent recording that kind of fits what was going on here. And they're kind of like, wait, was it a different person? Because we know William Minerva was killed, so it's either one of the supporters acting as him or something like that. Either way, something is, up here. It's not the exact story, effectively. But they're like, it has to be someone, positive for us. And this Oliver kind of just notes that it was because he's the one who I suppose has the big connection. He's the one who I suppose most sees Lucas as a father figure to him because of what they did during the Goldie Pond arc. Oliver says, but I couldn't stop him. I let him go even though I knew. And he says, Lucas in the past says, sorry, think of this as my parental duty. You must run. Don't come back here. You need to protect everyone. He entrusted everyone to us. We have to protect our family and friends no matter what. Us alone. For them. So, really nice. And then the end of chapter 110 is the reveal that Andrew is actually still alive, badly injured, but is stalking the kids through the forest, basically. And this is the kind of horror section here of like a human hunting them in the forest. So, that's interesting. At the start of chapter 111, we get the reveal that Dominic and Alicia are gone. So immediately the attack is coming in. We see Dominic is kind of shocked. He tells us, people don't come near me. And then one of the older kids just gets shot in the head and he's instantly dead. Dominic gets shot in the leg and goes down. And this is when Andrew reveals himself. He's holding Alicia hostage. And again, he's calling them food. That's what he's referring to them all as. And you can tell he's like completely gone kind of crazy. Like half of his face is kind of melted off. But otherwise is still able to stand and like you know, hold a gun, hold a child at the same time. You know, it's brutal, but he's still up and running for the most part. Um, and he holds everyone hostage because, of course, he knows that the sort of the way to manipulate them is that they care so much about the people around them that they're not going to do anything to put anyone at risk. And that's kind of what's happening here. So he starts to kick kind of Dominic on the ground. He taunts Emma, saying, you know, can you shoot Emma? No, you can't. You're right. You're Emma, right? I heard about you from Phil. All of you care about your family and you're kind. Every single one of you, foolishly so. So I suppose getting across the idea that, like, Phil, realistically, that's what he learned from Phil. About, like, he wanted to know the people he was going up against. And what he learned was that, you know, I suppose most of them are going to put family above all else, that they are selfless in that way and won't kind of put anyone at risk. So that's what he's learned, and I suppose it's why he's so confident in this situation of just having control of such a large group just by holding one of them captive. Then he tells the story about the, you know, 3 that went on ahead. You know, do you know how they died? They couldn't shoot me. They hesitated in shooting a human. I was wounded, and they had an advantage in numbers and the opportunity, but I was still able to kill them easily. So at this point, we effectively know that, I suppose, 6 of the kids have been killed. 3 here from this story. 1 who we saw just like a second ago. 2 from like the previous volume. And like Chris has been injured. Dominic has been shot in the leg. So it's getting pretty brutal, but again, they're only really doing, like, killing off the sort of non-name characters, because we have about like 60 characters running around here, which is a, you know, interesting kind of point. So he continues to taunt them about how, like, you know, then about how Hugo and Lucas were, you know, just, they were the same. They're the same as the other kids, and they died because, you know, one of them was injured, one of them protected each other, and in the end, you know, he survived and they didn't. So they seem to, again, double down on that fact. You know, did he check their bodies or whatever? Again, like, I still come back to the fact that, like, ultimately, if you really break it down, the injury that Andrew has here is just that he seemed to have a lot of cosmetic damage to the, you know, one side of his face, and I suppose he's effectively blind and probably deaf, and like effectively half of his face kind of doesn't work. But minus that, he seemed to get off fairly well for what appeared to be an explosion that could be seen from miles away. So are we meant to have any hope, or are meant to confirm that they're completely dead? And this is where sometimes mangas, depending on how they do this, do get into a confusing territory about this, about when we are meant to interpret something as being for sure dead, 100%, or hope that they could actually still be alive in some way. It is ultimately fairly unclear. So he continues to taunt them at the end, you know, like, you won't be able to shoot, you know. You'll all just do the exact same thing that everyone else do. You can't kill me because I'm a human. And the cliffhanger ending of chapter 111 is just a shot happens. And the question is, has Andrew shot Alicia, or has Emma shot him, or has who has actually shot? That's the question. And so what we get here is that Andrew gets shot, and it's Oliver kind of sniping from the trees, and he pinpoint shot the gun out of his hand and basically disabled all of Andrew's joints here. So he's effectively harmless, more or less, at this point, kind of. So he still runs at them. He kind of goes crazy here. They still don't want to shoot him. Ray is like this close when he gets up close to them to pulling the trigger, but they then notice that a demon beast has come, and so Andrew gets eaten by this giant demon beast, and everyone runs away. And sort of, you know, in the aftermath of this, the kind of cool down after this, it is a pretty brutal scene here of just everyone has to deal with the fact that, one, Hugo and Lucas are dead, and as I said, like 6 or so of the kids have died here, and there's injuries to deal with. Chris is kind of critical. They don't really bring up Dominic being shot in the leg all that much, but it doesn't appear like it's treated as seriously as Chris's injury. But there's a lot of emotional scenes here. You know, Gillian kind of bursts out in tears about, you know, the two of them. A lot of sadness from everyone here. And it's just this kind of acknowledgement from them all, like, it's okay, you can cry for now, but only now. You know, that they're giving themselves a chance to mourn, but that they still have to get on with things. And we see Ray out in the forest hunting, and he takes down what appears to be an owl, but it's actually a recording device, a kind of flying recording device, which is interesting because the owl is like the symbol in a way of William Minerva. It's what the Morse code stuff was printed on, and he obviously figures out that this is the reason why that guy knew where we were, and how they were able to avoid the surveillance cameras around the shelter. They were using these kind of effectively owl drone things, which was interesting. But they realized that we can't stay in this sort of, you know, forest area anymore. We have to find somewhere else to go. And this is where they reveal to everyone the call that they got, the note that Lucas left behind. And so they're going to go to that place. They're going to go to the place that was revealed to them by apparently William Minerva. And then last two panels of chapter 112 is apparently William Minerva, James Rattray. He says, "I hope that announcement reached that shelter too." A big guy says, "It should have. Let's begin, James." And it seems like, oh, they're sort of teasing us that James Rattray is actually still alive. So the suggestion that like he was killed very early on after sending that message, like what, 16 years ago at this point, isn't actually true. He might have actually survived. As we move into chapter 113, we actually cut to October 2047, which I suppose is more or less I think that's still more or less the present day. And we get basically in one of the factories, one of the farms, I suppose, we get this group of 4 new characters who have just gone into this facility and just killed all of these demons. There's a level of brutality to it in that they borderline are humans who like act like demons hunting demons. It's like the reverse here. That's how kind of brutal they are, because like one of the girls is like, "Can I eat the demons?" And she's so annoyed at the fact that humans get eaten that she actually eats them too. And they just have a little bit of an odd argument. It's an interesting group. You know, one of the guys wears a kind of bag in his head and has swords. The girl has like this kind of crazy baseball bat type thing. We have the guy from the previous chapter who was talking to James Rattray, and then another guy who has some interesting kind of chain-like weapons. And we get their names over the course of this. I don't think it's particularly important exactly right now to go into it, but the idea is that also here, and it's revealed that this is one of these mass production facilities, farms, is that James Rattray is there. And they say, you know, we destroyed the security as you instructed, but then what do they do with all of these mass-produced humans? And they go to free them, you know, release the change and stuff like that, but when they say, like, you know, you can leave now, they get no response. These mass-produced humans, there's nothing there, basically. And, you know, you see James Rattray at this point hug one of them and say, like, "Poor thing." And he says, "No, unfortunately, we can't take them with us. If we remove this device from their heads, they'll die. It's frustrating, but there's nothing we can do." So they do release them from their shackles, but then he has to shut down the facility, which results in all of them dying. And it's a brutal scene because I suppose you see the really, you know, brutal conditions in these mass production farms, and just these are human beings, and there's just nothing there. Like there's nothing individual about them. They are purely there to just be food. And it's this unfortunate situation of like, here's him taking down one of these farms, which is one of Emma's goals as well, is to free even the mass production farms. And now he gets there, and you can't save the kids there. There's no hope for them, because if they're in any way into the processes going on here, there's nothing you can do. They are just so far gone with what is done to keep them alive and stuff like that. It's a really kind of brutal scene that gives you the sense of like, okay, it's I suppose some of the characters seeing scenes like this definitely informs, you know, I suppose what is to come. But, he says, burn down this factory, the farms will be destroyed, no exceptions. I'll decimate all the farms, release all the children, and end this Neverland. And that is James Rattray at this point in time. And he says, I will create a paradise for you all. As he speaks to what appears to be this whole army of kids that are out there listening to him. So it appears that for the most part, James Rattray, who has actually survived, has accomplished his goal to some degree. He has freed a lot of kids. He has this whole support structure and is just continuing to try and fix the world effectively. Yeah, that's where they go. Everyone then heads off on their kind of trek to go to these specific coordinates. And I suppose the difference this time that they get across here in chapter 114 is that it's a little slower here, because before it was all like the top kids. It was, Emma, Ray, Dawn, Gilda. They were able to progress really, really quickly on these journeys. But because it's 55 people now, it's going a bit slower because they have a lot of the younger characters there. But what they learn along the way is that a lot of the younger kids have talents of their own, that because Emma, Ray, and the others have been away for so long on these trips to gather information, they haven't been fully aware of what the other kids have been doing back at the shelter with, like, Hugo and Lucas. And it's revealed here that they've been taught those entire months and months that they've been gone all the same survival skills that, like, Emma and Ray and so on were taught. So you see, it's actually the younger kids who are the ones, like, most suited to getting all of that information, because in a way, like, they almost, like, studied longer under Hugo and Lucas than Emma and so did. So they get all the food. Emma and, like, Dawn, like, struggle a bit to find out the specifics of food, but the younger kids are just like, oh yeah, we'll go up the trees, there's animals up there, the monkeys will give us food, and they just really quickly, get all the food. And it's revealed that they were all taught how to use weapons. They were all taught, the weak points of demons, how to fish and all that sort of stuff. And it's a really nice scene, because they go up to Emma and are like, that's why we'll work hard as well. So if you're tired, you can rest. And Emma realizes that, like, yes, of course, while we were on a journey for a year, these kids also grew up. They were all students of Hugo and Lucas after all. And so they all have that kind of meal together with the food that was gathered by everyone. And it's getting across the idea that Emma, Ray, those type of characters are always going to be the leaders of this group, but they're not, like, responsible for everything. Towards the end of chapter 114, it is mentioned that, yeah, Dominic's injuries as well. So that's it's nice that they addressed that as well. So, there's a bit of a discussion about, like, oh, we were really worried about all of this, we have to focus on what's going on. And then at the end of this chapter, they come into a kind of clearing, and there's some demon beasts attacking two humans. And it looks to be two humans, kids. They're wearing different clothes than they'd maybe expect, but they seem to be in a pretty bad situation here, surrounded by 4 giant demons. And that's what we get in the last chapter of this volume, is that they jump in, like Ray and Emma especially jump in, arrows, one-hit KO to all of these demons. They save them, and immediately are like, okay, who are you? What's going on here? And immediately the younger kid is like, thank you so much. I was so scared. I thought I was going to die. He's so grateful for this. And the other's like, hey, don't be so rude to the people who saved your life. And there's a fun dynamic here immediately of one of them being super, super apologetic, them both actually being that way. They reveal that their names are Jin and Hayato. And this is where the two of them both realize, wait, you're the runaways from Grace Field. We've been looking for you under orders from William Minerva. And so here's the connection we've sort of been waiting for. They're super excited at this point. They're really the runaways. They're so cool. They treated my injuries. This is great. They're being treated by celebrities and so on. They talk about how their boss is amazing. Emma notes that he's been releasing children from the farms and creating a large community. Yes. So that gets across the idea from before. He's smart and sharp. He's like a god. In just half a year, he's destroyed many farms. He's saved hundreds of children and has taken care of them. So that's the situation that's going on here. But the interesting thing there is in just half a year, so only half a year of what's been going on, but we know that, you know, William Minerva's been active for longer than that, so what's changed only recently and so on. So you're immediately questioning things of like, they told us this guy's James Rattray, they're calling him that, but is it? And you go back to the earlier things of like, they're very convinced that James Rattray is dead, so what's going on here? So yeah, they want the Jin and Hayato are like, allow us to guide you to our base. It'll be a place to you know, care for the injured and so on. And so Emma's really happy. They're happy that they've kind of found this other great connection. There's going to be more people now, and they'll join this kind of group around William Minerva and change things. And you know, he says that's what the boss wants. You know, you saved all of our lives. But suddenly they realize that Chris's condition has worsened. They have to do something about it now. It'll be too long to get to where William Minerva is, so they're going to have to do something a little bit more extreme to make sure that Chris survives. So Hayato says it's still away, it's too early to give up. There's a farm nearby. We can steal medicine that could help him. We'll lead you there. We'll sneak into the farm. So this kind of little arc now is beginning where they're now going to have to go into this farm to get medicine for Chris. And once they're done with that, resolve the immediate issue, then they can go to William Minerva and I suppose get the reveal on what's going on with him. So that's where we end this volume. And I think it's an interesting volume. Of course, there's the confusion about like, Hugo, is he dead or not? Lucas, is he dead or not? They seem to confirm it, but then Andrew was still alive and he wasn't as badly injured as you'd expect, given that that same injury, that same explosion, like killed those other two. And it's like confusing just with like just consistency there, but very emotional. And just the fact that like you have this gunfight, and it felt very different than the like very over-the-top gunfight of the Luvis fight, where he was able to like pick bullets out of the air, whereas it's human versus human, so it was very kind of Metal Gear Solid-like, of just them sneaking around, taking them out secretly under cover. Then when things get really intense with like hails of bullet fire, people are getting hit all over the place, and then it comes down to desperate moments. But that Lucas and Hugo were just so happy to have, you know, found each other again and be able to help the kids so much that they will sacrifice themselves for them in the end. I really, really like that. And what they were doing there, the little bit of a Hugo backstory that you got of like, he was about to kill himself before the kids arrived and sort of changed his path going forward and allowed him to regain what he lost, and how the last year and a half were so important to him. And then yeah, I suppose the kids ultimately being saved, having to kill a human by that demon beast arriving, but just getting across in a way how desperate a lot of the humans that support the demon side of the world are, that they don't see them as being truly human in a way. And I think that in itself is actually very, very interesting, that Andrew puts himself on the line, is willing to have himself die to do this thing. Like he doesn't like think like, oh, I can get away, I can survive, I can heal up. He puts himself on the line to still try and capture all of these kids. That's how devoted he is to this cause, and it's like, why? Like, what worse thing is there if he returns back and says I failed? In a way, like either way, I suppose he's dead. And then the last couple of chapters, obviously setting up that like, okay, William Minerva, James Rattray, actually is still out there somehow, or what? And you know, setting up that like, okay, here's the message, here's where the kids are gonna go, but here's a little detour. They found part of Minerva's group, but where are we going? Did they reveal that as well? Yeah, they did reveal as well the design that Hayato, his marking as like from the farms, is the one from the Lambda facility, which is the same one that Norman has, and is the same one that Adam has. So they're making this connection here. Like, you can borderline piece it together. Like, I have read a little bit ahead, so I know what the ultimate reveal is here. And I like how you can piece it together just from that, in that Lambda facility, that's where Norman was. He said he wanted to escape. A lot of time has passed since we last filled in with Norman, and they're talking about, like, in just half a year something happened. So, you know, put two and two together, Norman, of course. We'll wait and see the chapters where it's officially revealed, but I like that you can figure it out. There's just little hints there that make it clear, in that it feels much more likely than James Rattray still actually being alive. So, I think good volume, probably not the best volume, but some very emotional stuff here for sure. So that's my thoughts on volume 13, I think this was, of the manga. And yeah, we'll move on to the volume 14 stuff next week. Then I think there'll be one more video after that with another 9 chapters. And then I think it will probably be like one covering 4 or 5 chapters. And then after that, we'll be doing the weekly chapter reviews, which I'm excited to get into, because I think the chapters that are coming out weekly are getting towards very, very, very important stuff. So I'm glad I'm catching up at this point in time, so I can cover some of this very, very important stuff as it happens. So that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.